I can hear you. Good to see you again. How are things?
Things are good. Thank you. Awesome to see you too.
Remind me where are you located again? I can't remember.
Yeah, because I'm moving around everywhere all the time. I'm actually in Southern California now, not too far away from you, I think. I'm near Oceanside in Fallbrook,
Okay.
California.
Okay. Well, I just moved out of California, so I'm in Washington State now. So we're just kind of making circles around
Dang
the country, though. So I'm no longer. I think I'll be. I have to go to LA in a couple of weeks for a visit. But anyway, good to see you again. So for you guys that are here on YouTube, we're going to probably share the first 15 minutes or so. If you want to hear, if you want to listen to the whole thing live, just come on over to Rivera.health or MeterX.com. Both will get you to the same place, and you can join up for free and be part of the discussion. Otherwise, it will be out as a podcast in about, I don't know, a week or two, something like that. So anyway, well, Vivica, do me a favor if you don't mind, because this is the third time I've had the pleasure to chat with you, but some people probably are not familiar with you. Can you quickly just give us a quick rundown on your background?
Yeah, so I am a nutritionist. My official title are Whole Food Technician, no, certified technician in whole food nutrition. I don't even know it anymore. And I've been practicing nutrition for about 7 years now. I was one of the people that actually was instrumental in really starting the ketogenic diet and making it so popular through both my blog and my books and like all the, kind of diffusion work we have been doing talking about keto and videos and podcasts, etc. And in my clinical practice, I've kind of transitioned from using mainly a ketogenic diet for helping people and treating a lot of patients with metabolic diseases and mostly metabolic. And the practice has evolved to more an endocrine specialty. And also I got into carnivore about 4 years ago now and started learning about it, tried it myself, and then the practice expanded into not just a ketogenic diet, but also using as a meat-based / carnivore diet for therapy as a therapeutic diet in the practice. In my personal journey, my evolution has gone from like nutrient dense Western price style kind of eating to being very strict keto, like what I call keto paleo. It's a dairy-free, unprocessed ketogenic style of eating, which had then evolved into my carnivore experiment. And then it evolved past that into what I call like my meat-based way of eating right now. And, I shared this with Shannon before, and like we can go into it again, the reasons why the changes and like having to do with my age, with my hormones, and the conditions that I was dealing with and the ones that I wasn't dealing with versus people that might need to be more strict on one thing or another. So right now I'm doing nutrition and still eating mainly meat-based diet with little adventures. Like I have reopened my diet a little bit. So there has been inclusions um, into other foods. I am still completely gluten-free and will be forever, mainly mostly grain-free as well. Um, so yeah, that's in a nutshell.
All right. Well, thank you for that. And we would be remiss to not mention you'd also written a book, a fairly nice book about different carnivore options. You want to tell us a little bit about the essential carnivore diet book? Tell us a little bit about that. You'd organized it, as I recall, in a pretty interesting way. Go ahead and describe that if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. And Sean actually wrote the preface, the introduction to my book, and I was really honored for that and super, super happy. So yeah, this book is not approaching the carnivore diet from a slightly wider perspective. And so I you know, I co-wrote it with another author, Erin Blevins, and she's in a very different field of expertise than I am because she's a professional athlete. So she's a CrossFit athlete and competitor. So she's definitely, you know, she's much younger than me. She's in her 30s. I'm in my 50s now. And, you know, I am in menopause already. I am like moderately active. I'm not don't exercise regularly at this point. Like I'm more like active outside in nature, while she like basically lives at the gym. She competes and she is young and she's still, of course, having her periods. So we have two very different perspective on like how to approach carnivore diet. And she's also a professional chef. So it was really cool to write the book with her because her recipes are amazing. Um, but our main goal with this book was to make the carnivore diet accessible for people, but also an understanding of different ways that carnivore can be used for different conditions or different purposes and get the most out of the diet. So to make it so that people could approach, you know, this way of eating, this lifestyle from different angles and still be able to like reap the benefits of it without thinking like, oh, carnivore can only be meat and water and is only for people that do this. So we basically are describing here, like the pictures are great, by the way, they're really yummy looking. There are three styles of carnivore in this book. One is the purist style, which is the meat and water only, meat, salt, and water. And it's very strict, and we talk about extensively what people is it most helpful for, what conditions, basically like how to use it. And the recipes are also divided and categorized under these different styles. So if you are somebody that's just doing meat, salt, and water, you can easily find all the recipes that fall into the category. Then there is the what we call the nutrient dense style, which, and then it also tells you what to eat in that style of carnivore and the kind of people is most helpful for, and then it lists the benefit. And the last one is ancestral, the ancestral style. And in the ancestral, we actually included some carbohydrates. So we included honey and some fruit, selected fruit. We aimed for very low toxicity kind of plant-based foods to include here. And our aim, again, was to be able to use the carnivore style of eating meat-based style for people who have different needs. Maybe like, you know, your intestine is not able to handle plant foods at all. And like there are autoimmune diseases present, but also there is like a desire to be competitive in sports, like my co-author, Erin. And so using targeted carbs, like maybe honey or some fruit, like making the difference in like the ability to train a certain way or compete in certain ways, adding that little bit of carbohydrates to your meat-based diet. And again, we try to make it very clear what style can be for what people and give you information so that you can then extrapolate and make your own choice in like, so I'm this kind of person and this looks like it could be a valid option for me. And then of course, I think that individual experimentation with what, you know, what you decide to do, and then sometimes what your body will tolerate, they're still two different things. And this applies also to my practice with my patients, is like really listening to your body and where your body is at. And like, also like, you know, learning about the needs of the body, about being in a human body, ancestral body, and try to nourish ourselves and heal ourselves in a natural way. I think that meat as a, oh, there is a cute doggy walking by. Sorry, distracted by doggy. You know, aligning ourselves with the way that our body can like heal on its own without really much intervention, but just providing the necessary nutrients and the support. And more importantly, even removing all the things that are making us sick. And, you know, a meat-based diet, even just a purist style like salt and meat only, it's really a great way to do that, you know, aligned with our evolution, aligned with like how the nutrient needs of human beings, and, you know, making it so much easier for us to stay away from all the crazy toxic stuff that is called food these days. So yeah, and then there are I think 60 recipes, but anywhere from like your very classic ribeye. Sorry, the light is hitting the book, hard to see. That's Sean's favorite, as we all know. He's a ribeye kind of guy. But just being able to like get some skills in cooking meat in ways that it doesn't have to be, you know, meat is like so abused in a way, because like all these seasonings, I'm Italian, born and raised in Italy, and coming to the United States and still like sometimes going to people's kitchens, I am literally appalled at all the stuff that is used for seasoning and spices. Um, and all the things that they put in there, you know, um, it's really unnecessary for me to show the true flavor and be like nutritious, delicious, and healthy. Um, we really don't need to overkill it and, you know, like cancel the flavor with all these artificial seasonings. Also, it has a lot to do with American palate being completely obliterated by sugar. And because of like super pervasive sugar addiction in this country, people are really not able to taste anything. I see with my patients, and I'm sure you guys have experienced that as you started to go from a conventional diet into a meat-based diet, how your palate just came back online, your taste buds came back online. So the need for all these like horrible seasonings, it falls off, and we're able to really enjoy and like, you know, sublimate the flavor and the nutrition of the meat that we use if cooked properly. There are some also like kind of like old school recipes revisited, like aspic. I'm a super big fan of aspic, and you know, aspic is a great way to eat broth in summer too, like because you can make bone broth and have it cold instead of hot when it's really hot outside. And as a kid, you know, in Italy, I ate stuff like that, meat and gelatin, and that was our snack. You know, it's not the kind of thing that kids will eat here in the States. And yeah, and I try to like include as many recipes from my own traditions, like, you know, from Italy. So different kinds of meat, as try to vary. You know, I know that you could just eat beef all the time and be fine, but I like to keep things varied. And I have a great recipe for pemmican in here, as well as like, you know, upgraded beef jerky and a great energy source food. I love pemmican. It's a little bit labor intensive to make, but if you make a big batch, then you can enjoy it. And yeah, anyways, that's the book. It's making me hungry. I haven't had breakfast yet. And actually, I don't really eat breakfast. I'm at the point where like I do some intermittent fasting as well. So I usually have either salt water or a herbal tea in the morning, and just then intermittent fast until lunch, and then have a very early dinner. And I'm finding that that's working out the best as I get older. And things change, hormones change, HCl production changes, a lot of things change when you get past 50. It's a different story.
As someone who is halfway to 60, I'm soon to be there. I'm soon to be 55. You know, I wonder, you know, and maybe it's different between males and females, but you know, I will push back on the HCl production. I mean, I agree that we do see HCl production waning in many older people, but I don't think that's a natural consequence of aging. I think that is primarily pathology, quite honestly. And I think you should have robust HCl production up until, you know, the end of your life, in my view, but maybe I'm wrong. You mentioned that, you know, Erin was, and we've had Erin on recently, you know, is a younger athlete in her, I think, early 30s or so. doing competitive stuff like CrossFit and stuff like that. And you are, you said yourself, you're kind of in this menopausal age group. Becky's asking, how do you approach differently for two different age groups? And, we'll obviously leave this discussion to women because, there's most men, and I say that tongue in cheek, most men do not experience menopause, and although that is questioned in this day and age, but I don't question it. But anyway, how do you differentiate between the way you might diet as a younger woman versus someone who is in that menopausal time frame or postmenopausal for that matter?
For what I noticed with myself and also several of my patients that were doing carnivore or keto strictly and then transitioned to carnivore and then went from that is really that delicate passage that is perimenopause, like the end of perimenopause, and like it's about a year, 2 years. Well, that transition is happening, your hormones are transitioning, and basically it's kind of the transition from hormone production from the ovaries to the adrenals mainly. And I feel like because of the nature of our world and like the stress levels and less, also the last 2 years as far as stress has been concerning, like we have gone to like pretty much unprecedented levels here in the States, at least in my lifetime, has been like very consistently stressful, a lot of insecurity, uncertainty. And, at the other side, there is like everything that's happening out there as well concerning to vaccines or, jabs, wouldn't call them vaccines, and all the, medication and like, prevention for like diseases and, there is a lot of stressors. At the end of the day, these are all stressors, and stressors, either toxicity stressors or environmental stressors or psychological, mental, emotional stressors, they all come together to affect our hormonal balance. And so what I found is that there is a time that it becomes really delicate where women start experiencing like perimenopausal symptoms like hot flashes, night sweats. Usually it starts with night sweats and then it progresses into hot flashes. And I've seen that unfortunately some people were like, were not able to stay on the strict carnivore diet, and re-implementing some targeted carbohydrates really helped alleviate the symptoms, and it helped support the adrenals. Of course, everything starts with like blood sugar balance, right? So being carnivore actually does miracles for your blood sugar because it really stabilizes the blood sugar. And this is like the first step into supporting our adrenals. And then because the hormones are all connected, your endocrine system functions as a family, everything is connected. So we can't just separate like our stress hormones from our sex hormones, from our sugar handling hormones. They all influence each other. So it's really important to start like laying the foundation with blood sugar handling. And this is like, as I mentioned, it's great, as you all probably know very well here in this very well-educated community, that, carnivore, one of the great benefits is like stabilizing your blood sugar, really like, creating that solid foundation. And then that in turn will support your adrenal function. And it becomes like this kind of multiple loops. But when it comes to being a woman in perimenopause, we are trying to stabilize all these hormonal cascades, hormonal functions. And at some point, they just kind of go haywire anyways. And mostly, there are things that are out of our control, like the input of stressors we receive, or, the toxicity we receive by just being outside in the world. Look at like California and all the fires. The air quality was just abysmal. And like, I recently actually read an article that correlated the air quality from the fire to the incidence of COVID in California this year because of people who had damage, bronchial and lung damage from the fire. So there are things that we can't quite escape so easily. So when you are a woman transitioning, your hormones are transitioning, and you are like in this delicate state where ideally your adrenals will be rock solid and able to produce, all enough hormones on a consistent basis for that transitions where the ovary stop producing hormones. In this delicate moment, everything becomes kind of like heightened, like the sensitivity become heightened. So even if we try to do everything right, I feel like sometimes we really need to add more support. And like our human bodies, so, and this is, I know that like Dr. Baker Sean is like a very strong, healthy person, very stable, and he has a great idea of what is the possibility of the human body for health and healing and, maximum potential. And then there is also like clinical practice and seeing individuals that have been severely compromised. So getting to that maximum potential is going to take a whole process and sometimes a long process. And unfortunately, I hate to say this, but I've even seen a couple of cases where that healing process could not fully be concluded in the way that I wanted, for example. And there were women that I came in contact with that were their endocrine system was already so compromised that once they transition into perimenopause and then menopause, they needed like extra support for that transition. And we're talking supplementation and supplementation and modifications of the diet. So kind of reintroducing maybe some carbs into the carnivore diet, and then like not being able to rely on diet alone in order for them to be able to make this transition. But on the other side, then there are all the people that are extremely successful with that. And I think in my perspective, Sean, I think you might agree with that, is a little biased because of course I don't deal with a lot of healthy people because people that come to me are the ones that really need help and they can't do it by themselves. So my, perspective is often biased on like the worst case scenario because those are the people that come to me for help. I think in this community, there is a much larger range of experiences with a lot of people being able to really get to their optimal state with like just a diet and not having to use anything else. What do you think about that, Sean?
Well, I mean, clearly, I mean, obviously we've developed this entire community because we realize that people do need support in many ways. And sometimes it's just not feeling like they're alone when they're doing something that other people may not necessarily agree with, even, physicians, it was interesting when we did a survey of, I think 12,000 people doing this carnivore diet. One of the questions was asking about support, whether from family, friends, or physicians. And honestly, most people, I'd say more than half people did feel like they got support from both their physicians and their family, but a significant percentage didn't. Something like 30-40% did not have that support. And interestingly, the outcomes and the people that got support versus the ones that did not, the ones that got support had a better outcome. And so support, is definitely associated with a better outcome. And so it's important to have support systems, however defined, whether it's family, friends, online communities, coaches, doctors, healthcare providers, whatever. So that is an important part. Your thoughts on, obviously other things outside of diet. Yes, absolutely. I mean, I'm constantly encouraging people within this community and without to engage in physical activity. I'm a particularly big fan of strength training. I think, sleep, exercise, sunlight, all those things are going to have a role. Stress mitigation, some stress is healthy, some stress obviously needs to be dealt with. There's a question in here because you'd mentioned adding other foods. And again, I'm not opposed to that at all. I think you ultimately end up doing what works. And some people thrive tremendously on a straight up carnivore diet. And to be honest, I always feel my best when I'm 100% straight carnivore, when I start, adding dairy and, spices and things like that. often don't feel quite as good. I still feel pretty good, but not quite as good. Um, so, but you mentioned, the use of plants, and this has been a thought for a long time, is plants are seen as medicinal rather than nutritional, and it's not that you can't get some caloric benefit or even some nutrients from plants, but I think they, pale in comparison compared to the nutrition available and bioavailable in meat. And so how do you, when you mentioned, using plants as a therapeutic reason, can you be a little more specific on that? How do you use them? When do you use them? And who might benefit from them?
Yeah, I am totally on board about the therapeutic use of plant. I also see plants more as medicine than just like food. And yeah, definitely don't see a lot of benefits of using like this giant low calorie, low nutrient dense foods like, cereals as like being the staple of a diet. And I don't know, I've been going really deep into like the history of how do we get to this, and like kind of unraveling and looking back at like the whole agricultural experiment, like how do we get to agriculture, and like, why did humans stop being hunter-gatherers and became like farmers? And there are some really interesting books out there, like Sapiens is one that I've been mentioning a lot. And if anybody is interested in like learning more of our evolution and how the benefits of being hunter-gatherer versus the benefits of being in agriculture. But I really think that we have taken this whole experiment with like agriculture and then industrial foods and then like completely processed foods. We have taken it all the way to the extreme of what humans can take, to the point that now, like, most of the food that you find in a supermarket, I wouldn't even call food. So for me, it's been really about returning to the full cycle and back to the beginning of where we started as humans. So really kind of studying and trying to understand the hunter-gatherer model. And like, this is how we evolved for the longest period of time in humanity. And like, from the findings and, the archaeological findings, it was found that hunter-gatherer people were actually taller, stronger, and had better formed skulls and much better teeth. They kind of look like Dr. Sean here. They were tall and strong and well-formed. Those were like our hunter-gatherer ancestors, and only with agriculture, humans started kind of de-evolving again and became shorter and a lot sicker. So how do we nourish ourselves? And I think that if we look at like the origins, so there used to be a lot more large fauna on the planet, and it was quite easily accessed because like, a lot of the large animals were not really scared by humans yet. And so at the very beginning of our evolution, it was quite easy to hunt large prey and have plenty of meat, plenty of animal protein to have access to. And so that was naturally, an easily obtained staple for the diet that really helped us evolve these big brains of ours. And like the gathering, the plants, think about how different the plants were back before agriculture. So we have really done a lot of like genetically modifying, and this is even before the labs. We have like modified plants to be more palatable, contain more sugar, and the fruits be much bigger and sweeter, and the annual vegetables to be larger and not necessarily more containing more nutrients. The soils have been depleted. So what we have now is like we are dealing with the plant matter that is like severely altered from the kind of plants that we ate when we were evolving. And there is that to take in consideration. So when we think about even like fruits, and like using fruit for like target carbohydrates, we need to keep in mind that fruits have been manipulated. And now, like if you take an apple, that apple probably has like 70% more sugar than an apple originally had, you know. And probably if you look at statistics from like now to like 100, 200 years ago, that apple has about 40% less nutrients. And these are loose statistics, but I'm sure you can find some exact numbers out there. So the nutrients in our vegetable plant-based foods have severely decreased. And at the same time, we could still use certain plants, you know, for specific purposes, as like Dr. Shan was mentioning, in a medicinal way, in a therapeutic way. And just the first example that comes to me is like dandelion greens. That's one of my favorite things, and is being part of my diet and continues to be in part of my diet. And like dandelion greens are very bitter. And for me, they have two functions. One, they add fiber, healthy fiber to my diet, because my gut, not having been compromised by whatever number of things in like antibiotics, glyphosates, you know, indiscriminate use of medication, you know, I've never really experienced that. So my gut is still able to process fiber. So I do actually need fiber and benefit from fiber. When I don't have any fiber and I try to go full carnivore and do it long enough for my gut to adapt, but it was never ideal for me. So, you know, we have an endogenous microbiome, is like our native flora of our gut that is being colonized at birth and like even before birth, like going through the birth canal, breastfeeding, like, so this original microbiome blueprint basically stays the same. We are not able to like obtain more strains and change our microbiome substantially, and at least this is what the research is showing right now. We're able to like increase certain local strains like native strains and decrease others, but basically like that's what our microbiome is going to be. And when we have a healthy start with our microbiome, and we're lucky enough to have had, you know, contact with dirt, or having have a vaginal birth, or having breastfed from our mothers, and having put our mouth as babies on everything possible and imaginable, you know. So the result of that is being able to tolerate fiber well, and being able to have, you know, a good, efficient gut activity, including some plant materials. What I've seen is that the more dysfunctional the gut is, the less it can tolerate plants. And then that's when we find the most benefits in reversing to complete just like pure animal foods at that point. But so I want to use, you know, looking at plants really as like kind of like this sprinkle on like the top of the pyramid, not the bottom, you know, and looking at different benefits that we can get from the foods, the plant foods, that can be complementary and beneficial on top. So herb, you know, I use also herbs, a lot of herbs in my practice, and I use food-based supplements. And for me, like, plant foods are great in food-based supplements because I know that those have been properly raised, they're organic, they're non-GMO, and then they've been concentrated in a way that maintains all the nutrients, and the nutrients are concentrated. So a lot of times I tell my patients, unless you need fiber, you know, you can just eat meat. And then if we need the plants, we can put them in as supplements or herbals like echinacea or, you know, andrographic complex, like different herbs that will stimulate your immune system, adaptogens like ashwagandha. You know, ashwagandha is a nightshade. So if you ate ashwagandha like by the plateful, it would be very toxic. But when we take it in small quantities, is an adaptogen. That means is like naturally stimulating the stressors, like a stressor for your body, but in a way that will create more resilience. And I think that that's also part, I know that, what's his name? Oh my God, I forgot. He wrote the other carnivore book, Dr. It's been a minute. I have it there on the shelf, I think. No, it's not there. Oh, yeah, it is. Dr. Saladino, thank you, it was on the shelf. So Dr. Saladino, in his book, The Carnivore Code, I have an argument about that. No, plants are toxic and they're not beneficial, and like we shouldn't use them. There is no such thing as the hermetic effect, and like it's just no. And I think he has evolved past that perspective now. Even him has kind of got it. But I think actually that plants can be used beneficially, and those very toxins, it's kind of like homeopathy, like what causes the symptom, if taken in like very, very small amounts, infinitesimally small, will actually relieve that symptom. And I think that with plants is kind of the same, that if used in large quantities, anything like, look at all the phytotoxins contained in plants, the oxalates, the phytates, you know, um, there are a number of phytotoxins. When used in large amounts, we do get that toxicity. And then being able to instead use the plants as supplementation almost, even if you're just eating it as food, you can have your little side of dandelion greens, and that is your supplement in a way. Or you can have nettle tea, and that is your supplement, and is also a food, and is also beneficial. And by the way, I love steamed nettles with butter on them. Is one of my favorite things. And for me, that's a way to use food, plant-based foods as medicinals. Um, so yeah, I think that's kind of my take on plants. I don't know if there was any other questions that you want to throw at me, Sean.
Well, I mean, those questions actually came from our members, and so it was just interesting listening in. You talk about obviously the food has evolved, both plant and I think to a lesser degree animal. I mean, obviously with the animals we select animals that provide more milk or meat. I mean, that's the way they've been bred. For that purpose. If you want to breed an animal to be fast, you breed them fast animals. If you want to breed an animal to produce more milk, you do that, and that's what's largely done. And we're seeing the same thing with the food that we're breeding. And now some people are concerned that we're breeding crops that are drought resistant or pesticide resistant, or all these other things that allow them to produce a higher yield for theoretically less money, I suppose. Do you find that with, and this is something that I've seen, but I want to see what your experience is. With time, people they go on a carnivore diet or a meat-based diet or a mostly carnivore diet, and they get better. I mean, their diabetes gets better, their weight gets better, their gut gets better. That they are sometimes able to tolerate foods that they once could not tolerate. Is that something you're finding?
Yes and no. Sometimes definitely yes. And I would say that for the majority of my experience, if people take the time that they need to heal, they definitely are able to then reintroduce other foods and open up the diet. I call it like reopen the diet to different foods. I think there are some people that don't, and probably it could be just a question of time and being like compliant enough and strict enough in the time where you're doing the healing phase of your diet, and then you're able to reintroduce some other foods. Sometimes it's also a question of like, what do you think you can reintroduce? Because like, as I say, I think that 90% of the things we find in the supermarket these days are not even food. They're like so processed, so manufactured, so full of like, chemicals and preservatives and you name it, that I wouldn't call them food. So if somebody tells me, oh, I'm going to be carnivore for a year, so then I can reintroduce bread to my diet, I, probably will disagree. Now, I've had this experience with some patients where like the husband of my patient is making this like sourdough bread at home from scratch that is like been fermented for like, I don't know, 72 hours or like 3 days, and like made from like ancient grain that are no GMO, and it's still gluten. And, you know, at that point, like my patients ask me, like, is it okay to have some of this bread? Is the best possible bread I could ever find. And at that point, I'm like, okay, you know, we need to take it case by case. Maybe in the case of a person that does not have an autoimmune disease, especially not autoimmune thyroid, where gluten is really your kryptonite, yes, we can try to reintroduce something like that to see if you're tolerating it. But I think like Dr. Shan was just saying that it feels optimal when it's really strict. I think that once we can reach our feeling of optimal and we have that parameter, that standard of measure that we can use in our daily life to understand, because a lot of times we have been so sick and just so feeling like crappy for like most of our lives that we have no idea whatsoever what it means to feel like vibrant, full of life, full of energy, you know, able to sleep good, able to wake up in the morning without caffeine and just have energy, you know, stable, strong adrenals. So first, you know, I think it would be really important to set that standard of what does it mean for you to be at your highest potential for wellness. Then you have a parameter, and trying to reintroduce other foods, you know, most of my patients, for what I experience, they know right away. Once they feel great and they know what it is to feel great, and then they go and try to go eat out at the restaurant, and there is crappy oils, like really bad oils being used, they feel it immediately. So at that point, I think you have your own compass built in where you're able to navigate, you know, what is my expansion of diet look like? And sometimes you can reintroduce things like, I don't know, a bit of fruit that is not overly sugar. Like I really like papaya, for example. Papaya for me is a medicinal food. It has a lot of enzymes. It's, you know, you don't cook it, so the enzymes are still alive. And it helps bring in water, so it's hydrating, and like it's not overly sweet. It's really hard actually to find a very sweet papaya. You can eat it green as well in a salad with some lime juice and some salt. And so that's a medicinal food. You reintroduce that, most people that went from carnivore and like had intestinal issues at some points. So I've also experienced this, that people that were severely constipated, couldn't deal with fiber, started carnivore diet, eliminated all fiber, got regular, their intestines started working again, did a year of that, strict carnivore, everything working great. And then all of a sudden things just stop working. And they have to start introducing fiber. And now at this point, they start introducing fiber and suddenly things are working again. So the body is pretty mysterious and has its own way of healing. I am always constantly in awe and learning from the body itself. And I think that at the end of the day, with all this conversation, all these things said, like my ultimate truth is that I just ask the body and the individual body of a person and trying to understand the best I can what their body is needing individually in that moment. And that changes all the time too, you know, because like your body before carnivore, during carnivore, after carnivore is going to be very different. So really us being able to listen to what our body is needing and have a good understanding of like, no, like taking a drug is not going to be good for you because, you know, it's chemical and it's a toxin. And like understanding, for example, the basic understanding of what are toxins, what kind of things are toxic. And like, you know, just like saying vegetables contains toxins, they contain phytotoxins, and chemicals made in the lab Even like vitamins bought over the counter, they're made in the lab. Are they toxic? They can be. They're not nutrients anymore. They become like nutraceuticals because they're not just a natural nutrient. So really starting to understand the foundation of your body's functioning. And that's why in my career, I've been like, people want to pigeonhole you and like, you are the meat guy, you're the keto lady, you're the intermittent fasting lady. And like, I keep defying definitions and like people get confused and don't know where, who are you then? What do you do? But, I'm somebody that wants to understand what your body needs and how to bring you back in alignment with your body's needs and your nourishment needs and the need for your body to be able to heal by itself. Because our bodies, as most of you here probably already experience, with the right tools and the right support, your body just doesn't need anything external outside that nutrition and, flushing away those blockages. And then it will just return to homeostasis. So we need a lot less than we're thinking we need sometimes. And I think that that's why meat is so powerful, because it enables us to like eliminate all the stuff that is not necessary, give us a great reset. And then some of us might just be perfect on it for the rest of our lives.
Yeah, it's good perspective, Vivica. I'll tell you what, we are unfortunately, gosh, this time just flew by. It's almost an hour almost here. What I want to do
I know.
is spend the last couple of minutes just kind of sharing where people can go to find you on social media, where they can get your book, where they can go if they want to contact you for any other purposes.
Yeah, thank you, Sean. So the nourishcaveman.com has been kind of my main platform. I am trying to like, because I've been out there so long and I have so much stuff online, it's kind of confusing sometimes. But I have a new landing page where you can kind of find a taste of all the things that I do and all the offerings that I have. And that page is thehealingfoodsmethod.com. That's my program, my 4-month program that I do with patients. And thehealingfoodsmethod.com/services is where you find all my offerings. And I'll type it in the chat for you guys. And then, of course, I am on Instagram, YouTube channel, some ancient videos on there. And started a long time ago. And on Facebook, I also have a private group that's a little bit more targeted to women in a more holistic perspective. And it's called Sacred Whole Woman Facebook group. So I'll type it in there, but you can also just Google Viveka Menegat's, my name, and you'll get a couple of pages of things, links and results. So thank you so much. And it was awesome being here with all of you this morning. Thank you, Sean. Always great to see you.
Okay, likewise. Thanks, Vivica. Tomorrow, guys, we've got Phil Meese coming in. He's going to be talking about pemmican, the carnivore bar, and, using it as, talking about maybe survival food. Some people are worried about if they, if some craziness happens, you may be living off the grid for a while. So anyway, that should be an interesting discussion. All right, guys, thank you very much. And we'll see a lot of you guys tomorrow. Have a great day otherwise. Bye, Vivica. Take care, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye, Sean. Bye, everybody.